If you need to use the if function in conjunction with different columns in a worksheet, sometimes you need to create what's called a compound condition. In English, let's say the following. We want to give a bonus to people in this list here who have a job rating of 4 or 5 and who have a status of being full-time. In other words, only full-time people are eligible for a bonus, but they must also have a good job rating. So there is a function in Excel called AND. There's a similar function called OR. Sometimes these functions can stand alone. Sometimes they can be used with other functions. Many different kinds of functions can be nested. The if function by itself, which is quite powerful, doesn't really give this capability that we're looking for by itself. So in English, we like to say again, if your job rating is 4 or 5 and your status is full-time, we're going to give you a bonus, otherwise not. I'm typing the word and right now. And you might be saying, well, yeah, but shouldn't that go between the conditions? Well, let's say we might like it to, but that's not how this function works. We want to state now not just necessarily 2 conditions, but maybe 3, maybe 4, maybe 5. So let's put in the first condition that we mentioned. And it doesn't make any difference the order of these, but let's indicate that we want the job rating here to be greater than 3. Of course, that means 4 or 5 in this scenario. We have only the ratings 1 through 5, comma. The other condition that we're interested in here is that the status here be equal to, double quote, full-time. And you want to make the entry here exactly the way you see it in column D. Now, the reason we don't put the word and between the two is that if we have a third condition, a fourth condition, a fifth condition, we simply use the comma to separate those rather than having to put in the word and over and over and over again. So though it's most common to have only 2 conditions, it certainly is possible to have many more. I believe it goes as high as 31 here. I'm going to put in a right parenthesis. If both of these conditions are true, comma, the answer is 1,000. And if they're not, comma, the answer is 0. Now, that inner function, potentially standalone function, has its set of parentheses. We want to make sure that the outer set matches. Always have the same number of open left and right parentheses. Right parenthesis, enter. The answer here is 0. This person has neither the correct job rating or the correct status. Let's double click and fill in the column here. And I think you can quickly see what's going on. Those who get the 1,000, for example, in row 6 here, Danny White here has a status of full-time, job rating of 4. The person above, Bobby Mendoza, has a good job rating but isn't full-time. Person in row 2 is full-time but not a good job rating. Once again, as we look at the function here for row 2, we see how it's playing out. And as you get used to these, they make perfect sense. They're not difficult to set up, but it does make the function a bit longer looking. And once again, too, the column here is wider than it ultimately needs to be, but we want to see how the function looks as we're preparing it here. So it's a good idea to temporarily make the column wider. Now, if the logic changes in the sense that this organization says we're going to give you a bonus if either your job rating is good or your status is full-time, you might question the wisdom of that, but we use the word or here. And as we change all these here, I'm pressing Control-Enter. Now the rules have changed so that if either condition is true, the bonus of $1,000 is awarded. And we see how this is changing. And you could say this is a more popular decision here by management for sure. Many, many more people are getting the bonus now. And here and there, you'll run into situations where maybe we've got ands and ors mixed. What if we now say you're going to get a bonus if either you have a good job rating or you've got a combination of full-time and so many years of service? I want to put the word and in here. And within and, we want to put in comma, years. Suppose it's greater than 10 or greater than or equal to 10. Now, trying to say this in English, sometimes you'll find yourself talking to your monitor. What are we about to say here? If either you have a good job rating, so here's the or, if this is true, or you have a combination of these 2 characteristics, 2 criteria here, your status is full-time and you've been here 10 or more years. Now, again, on a case-by-case basis, we can look at some of these and figure out what's going on. This person has a good job rating. We don't care what the status is. This person has a good job rating automatically. Now, this person here doesn't have a good job rating, but is full-time and has more than 10 years of service. And so you can check these out one by one, what's going on. Here's a person who doesn't have a good enough job rating, but is full-time, but doesn't have enough years. And here and there, as you think these out, you can get increasingly used to structuring these. If you encounter these just suddenly out of the blue, they take a little bit of time to figure out, but there's quite a lot of creativity that goes on here. And when it's your data and you really know what you want to do, these ring true pretty quickly. And you always want to test them out on a few cells before copying them down an entire column like I've been doing here. Now, there's another capability in here too that I would more or less steer you away from, but from time to time you might want to use this or at least know that it exists. Sometimes you want to check for the negation or the opposite of a condition. If we backtrack a little bit and say we simply want to make sure that everybody gets a bonus who's full-time but nobody else, the best way undoubtedly would be to say, if your status equals full-time, then we'll give you $1,000. That certainly would be the best way to say this, and that would be the appropriate way to say it right there. But if we were somehow to put in this, now this would definitely be awkward here, and then reverse it. Now, I think maybe I'm loading this a little bit in the opposite direction, but I think you could see this would not be the best way to do this, and yet this will work. If it's not the case that someone is full-time, the bonus is 0, but if it is, it's 1,000. But occasionally you will see that word, and of course it means negation. A better way to do this possibly is to remove this and change this symbol to be not equal to. That's the less than arrow followed by the greater than arrow. And take out the parenthesis here. So here's another way to do it. So we see various uses here of using and or. Certainly less important, the not function, but certainly different ways to structure a condition inside of an if function to give you greater capability and creativity.